Before her name shimmered in stage lights and echoed in cinema halls, Amara Blake was simply Amara Jones, the preacher's daughter from Charleston, a girl with honey-brown eyes and a voice that could hush tempests. She was born on a Sunday morning, just as the bells rang through the old Baptist chapel on King Street. Her father, Reverend Elijah Jones, called it divine timing. Her mother, Lottie, said she came out with her eyes wide open, like she was already searching for the spotlight. Their home was modest, a white wood-paneled house with ivy creeping up its porch rails and floorboards that whispered under every footstep. But inside, it pulsed with warmth, hymns, and handmade beauty. Lottie stitched dreams into dresses with her weathered fingers, while Amara curled beside the hearth, speaking Shakespearean lines to the fire like it was an audience of kings. "To thine own self be true," she would whisper, voice trembling with earnestness, barely 8 years old. And her father would smile, pausing his sermon prep to nod. "You already are, baby girl. Just don't let the world make you forget it." Elijah Jones taught her how to pray, not just with words, but with her walk. "Integrity is not something you do," he'd say, his deep voice laced with Southern wisdom, "it's who you are when no one's watching." He'd lay hands on her shoulders and ask God to guard her heart in a world that would try to bend it. Amara grew up wrapped in discipline, warmth, and the weight of purpose. While other girls flirted behind pews, Amara clung to her journal and read classic plays beneath oak trees. She wasn't naive, just focused. Devoted. A dreamer anchored by her roots. At the corner store, she once returned a nickel overpaid in change. The cashier laughed, but she stood straight and said, "My soul's worth more than 5 cents. Love, to Amara, was sacred. Not the kind of love you scribble in margins or chase out of loneliness, but the enduring kind, honest, messy, tender, and true. She believed in fidelity like it was gospel, in loyalty like it was law. So when she earned a full scholarship to Juilliard at 18, no one was surprised. She didn't claw her way to the top, she soared, graceful and tireless, her morals stitched into every movement like the seams of her mother's gowns. New York was a far cry from Charleston. The city roared, pulsed, demanded. But Amara didn't flinch. She walked through its fire and found herself refined, not consumed. Directors took notice. Audiences leaned in. By 25, her name was a murmured promise in casting rooms across Broadway and Burbank, a name spoken with reverence, as if even Hollywood had to admit, this girl had soul. And it was in that golden haze, at the height of her quiet rise, that she met Julian Blake. The name alone sounded like poetry. And for a while, he was. But all flames look beautiful in the beginning. Julian Blake entered Amara's life like a perfectly timed line in a monologue, effortless, magnetic, and unforgettable. He was 12 years her senior, but there was nothing dated about him. His mind sparkled like city lights reflecting off wet pavement, sharp, quick, and full of unspoken stories. He had a face that looked carved by contradiction. Soft around the eyes, sharp at the jaw, with a voice that could lull wolves to sleep. They met beneath the low lights of an indie screening in Tribeca, surrounded by the scent of espresso, exposed brick, and the hush of pretentious film critics. Amara had come for the film, but Julian came for her. He spotted her across the room, shoulders upright, chin poised, eyes soft but scanning. Not performing. Just being. She radiated that rare kind of grace, not loud, not rehearsed, but sacred. He approached with the casual boldness of a man used to making entrances. No small talk. No pickup lines. Just this, you don't act like an actress. You act like royalty hiding in plain sight. And somehow, it didn't feel like flattery. It felt like prophecy. Julian Blake knew how to wield language the way others wield weapons. He spoke in brushstrokes, not bullet points. Compliments fell from his lips like carefully laid silk, never too much, never too little. He asked questions that made Amara pause before answering. Questions that felt like he was asking her soul to come closer. He was ambition in human form, CEO of a boutique media agency, fluent in French, partial to red wine and Neruda. He read novels on airplanes and quoted philosophers like he knew them personally. But what caught Amara wasn't the resume. It was the way he looked at her, as if every time she spoke, she cracked the sky open. To Amara, Julian wasn't just a man. He was a manifestation. A walking, talking answer to late-night prayers whispered beneath starlight and ceiling fans. Their love moved fast, but never felt rushed. It flowed. Candlelit dinners in Harlem bistros. Poems sent via text at 2 a.m., you are the ache I never knew I carried. Drives through the Hudson Valley with jazz and silence in equal measure. Nights spent entangled on her apartment floor, confessing their childhood fears, his of failure, hers of being too much. He told her he admired her backbone. She told him she wasn't used to being seen. And in that sacred space between two broken but beautiful souls, something bloomed. Within a year, they were married. No headlines. No celebrity chaos. Just a private garden tucked behind a friend's estate in the Carolinas, where oaks reached for heaven and Spanish moss draped the day in southern softness. Her father walked her down the aisle, his eyes teary but proud. Lottie sewed the veil by hand. Pearl-stitched and pearl-soaked. Julian stood beneath an arbor wrapped in white roses, wearing a suit like it was his second skin, eyes locked on Amara like she was the only truth left in the world. They exchanged vows with voices trembling from joy, not fear. And when the doves were released, rising in spirals above them, Amara thought, this must be what forever feels like. She didn't know then that not all doves return. Some just fly away. Amara's star soared like a psalm rising to the heavens. By 28, she was a household name. Scripts came in droves, biopics, dramas, prestige television. Her face lit up screens and her voice stirred something sacred in audiences across continents. But through all the glitter and temptation, Amara remained grounded. Unshaken. She was still the preacher's daughter, still the girl who believed art should serve something higher than ego. She turned down roles that made her soul uneasy. One Oscar-tipped drama had critics buzzing, producers begging, and a director who swore it would redefine her career. But the script smeared love, glorified betrayal, and stripped the female lead for shock value. Her agent had pleaded. Amara, this is your moment. She replied softly, I'd rather miss a moment than lose myself in it. And that was Amara, principled in a world built on compromise. She tithed 10% of every check to her father's church, quietly, without fanfare. She FaceTimed her mother before every audition, needing that voice, that blessing, even when she stood on the world's biggest stages. Her wedding ring remained firm on her finger, not just metal, but covenant. A private vow she re-spoke every morning when she kissed it gently, like prayer. But Julian began to change in the ways only success knows how to seduce. As Amara climbed higher, so did he, but his ascent came with ego, with edges that hadn't been there before. His once gentle control morphed into condescension cloaked in charm. He started directing darker, more provocative films. Edgy, critics said. Borderline immoral, Amara thought. But she didn't judge, at first. She only asked questions. Why didn't you come to the premiere? Who was the actress you were with on that press trip? Why does this script feel cruel? And Julian? He had answers. Always answers. Wrapped in smiles. Masked in kisses. But the kisses grew colder. Briefer. Like punctuation rather than passion. He attended parties without her, claiming, you wouldn't like that scene, babe. She stayed home, scripts in her lap, wearing silk robes and silence. The man who once wrote poems now wrote excuses. The man who once saw her soul now scrolled past it. At first, she tried harder. Cooked his favorite meals. Wore the perfume he said reminded him of spring. Left notes on his pillow. Waited up. But how do you fight for someone who's already halfway gone? She never said the word suspicious. Not out loud. But it hung in the air between them like smoke from an unseen fire. Still, Amara held on. To faith. To vows. To the woman she promised herself she would always be. But something was shifting. The garden where love once bloomed now felt strangely cold. And though she wore her wedding ring each morning like armor, it was beginning to feel too light. As if the weight of love had left it. It didn't come with thunder. No screaming. No shattered glass or broken vows. The first sign was quiet, so quiet, it almost passed unnoticed. A coat draped over the back of a chair. Julian's. Italian wool, slate gray. She picked it up to hang it and paused. That scent. It wasn't hers. It was heady and sweet. Foreign. Not the soft, floral warmth of her own perfume but something sharper. Louder. Like someone trying too hard to be unforgettable. She said nothing, at first. Just stood there, coat in hand, pulse suddenly louder than the jazz humming through their apartment speakers. Then came the text. His phone, buzzing against the marble counter as he showered. A message preview lit the screen. Last night was worth every risk. Face blowing a kiss. The words knocked the air out of her lungs like a slap from the Holy Ghost. She didn't cry. Not yet. She waited until he emerged from the bathroom, towel around his waist, eyes lazy and lips already forming some careless charm. Julian, she said, voice even, rehearsed. Whose perfume is on your coat? He looked at her, then laughed. Like she had told a childish joke. You're serious? He asked, stepping past her. Amara, you've always been a little intense. It's part of your charm. She didn't blink. And the message? He glanced at his phone. Smirked. You're reading previews now. That's not like you. Neither is cheating. That's when his warmth vanished. His face, once the stage for poetry and passion, hardened into something distant. Dismissive. You're too moral for your own good, he snapped. This is the real world, Amara. You need to act, not live like a saint. She stared at him, this man she once thought was heaven sent. And for the first time, she saw it, the rot beneath the polish. The cold behind the charm. The arrogant success had seeded in his soul. That night, she didn't scream. She didn't beg. She slept alone, wedding ring pressed between her palms like a broken prayer. And just when she thought the ache couldn't stretch any wider, the irony knocked. A call from her agent. A new role. A Broadway lead. Devotion. A raw, haunting story of a woman betrayed by the man she loved, torn between staying loyal and reclaiming her worth. The timing was cruel. Or maybe divine. She hesitated. The character's pain mirrored her own too closely. The script felt like someone had opened her diary and turned it into theater. But she took it. Not because she was ready, but because something deep within her, the preacher's daughter, the prayer warrior, the wife, the woman, knew she had to. She signed the contract with trembling hands. And as she read her first monologue aloud in her living room, you said you loved me, but you only loved my loyalty, tears blurred the page. She wasn't just acting. She was bleeding truth into fiction. And somewhere in the silence between lines, she realized, this wasn't just a role. It was a reckoning. It was a Tuesday. The kind of Tuesday that starts with black coffee and rehearsed lines, not knowing that by noon, the world would be dissecting her heartbreak like it was entertainment. The photo dropped like a guillotine, unfiltered, unforgiving, and perfectly timed for maximum devastation. Julian Blake. In Milan. Arms wrapped tightly around a blonde screenwriter half draped in his trench coat, lips locked in a kiss so intimate it could have been mistaken for a still from a film. But there were no cameras rolling. No script. Just betrayal. And the way he kissed her. It wasn't casual. It was familiar. That same signature tilt of his head. The way his fingers cradled her jaw, like the moment meant something. It was the same kiss he gave Amara after their first premiere. The same kiss that once said, "You are my world." Now it said, "You were replaceable." The internet did what it does best. Headlines multiplied like roaches. Power couple no more. Julian Blake's betrayal exposed. Sources say Amara was blindsided by affair, heartbreak in high heels, Amara's silent tears, screens lit up. Podcasts speculated. TikToks were made dissecting her body language in old interviews. Fans mourned like she'd died, not just been discarded. But Amara? She said nothing. Her phone rang endlessly, her mother, her publicist, her best friend, morning talk shows offering space to share your side. Her agent begged. "You need to get ahead of this, Amara. Release a statement. Claim the narrative before he spins it." But Amara declined. She turned her phone off. Sat by the window. Watched the clouds roll over Manhattan like witnesses to her undoing. And still, she said nothing. Not because she was weak. But because silence can be sharper than any statement. Her silence became her thunder, loud, unsettling, impossible to ignore. The press didn't know what to do with it. No crying paparazzi shots. No rage posts. No interviews where she clutched tissues and offered up her pain as a spectacle. Just stillness. And in that stillness, the world leaned in. Because sometimes, when a woman refuses to perform her grief, it becomes a rebellion. Julian had made her heartbreak public. But she would not give him the power of her public reaction. Let the world speculate. Let the tabloids invent. Let the timeline refresh every 5 seconds with theories. She would not explain the ache that had no punctuation. Instead, she rehearsed. Devotion was opening in 3 weeks. And the woman they thought was breaking was about to burn the stage down. Opening night of Devotion arrived not like a celebration, but like judgment, sharp, sobering, and divine. Outside, the theater glowed with anticipation. Flashbulbs painted the red carpet in light. Fans lined the barricades holding signs that read, "We love you, Amara." The air was thick with something electric, not just expectation, but justice. Amara arrived cloaked in silence and silk. Her gown was custom, ivory, smooth, and spectral. The costume designer had whispered, almost reverently, "You look like a bride walking through her own ghost story." She only smiled. Inside the velvet-lined theater, the audience waited with bated breath. Celebrities, critics, industry giants all packed into rows like eager witnesses at a trial. Front row center. Julian Blake. Wearing sunglasses. Indoors. As if the shades could protect him from the truth that was about to blaze through the stage like wildfire. He looked smug. Composed. Leaning back like he was watching her and not about to be exposed by her. He thought her grace would silence her. He thought the stage would cage her. He did not know it would set her free. The lights dimmed. The curtain rose. Devotion began. Amara moved through the first 2 acts like liquid fire, graceful, contained, commanding. The audience leaned in, breathless. The dialogue crackled. Her presence consumed every inch of space. But it was Act 3, Scene 4 that would go down in theater history. The confrontation. In the script, her character Eleanor, the betrayed wife, was meant to fall apart. She was supposed to cry. To beg. To ask, "Was I not enough?" Amara stood center stage. Back straight. Eyes blazing. And then, she went off script. The cast froze. The director, watching from the wings, gripped his headset like it was a lifeline. The audience didn't know yet. But Julian did. Because Amara turned, slowly, powerfully, and looked directly at him. She didn't blink. Didn't flinch. And she spoke. You took vows, not for love, but for optics. You kissed me on camera, then kissed her in shadows. You thought I'd play nice. That I'd stay silent. But tonight. I am not Eleanor. I am Amara. And I see you. It wasn't theater anymore. It was testimony. The audience didn't move. They couldn't. Every word cracked like thunder. Every breath was scripture. Every syllable stripped Julian bare before 1,000 eyes. He shifted. For the first time, unsure. Unmasked. A tear fell down someone's cheek in the third row. Then another. And then, applause. It started slow, unsure, then erupted like a storm breaking through silence. People rose to their feet. Cheering. Weeping. Roaring. She didn't bow. Not yet. She just stood there, tall, unbroken, more than a woman, more than an actress. She was truth, wrapped in silk and fire. Julian slipped out before the curtain call. Of course he did. But Amara? She didn't wait for the standing ovation to die down. She didn't smile or return to the stage with the rest of the cast for the final bow. She walked. Off stage. Off script. Off everything. Her heels struck the hardwood like war drums, like a verdict being handed down. Each step was a sentence. Each echo, a sermon. No more performances. No more pretending. The cast watched her leave, stunned into silence. The director's headset buzzed with static and confusion. Stagehands parted like the Red Sea as she passed. Somewhere in the wings, someone whispered, "Is she okay?" But Amara wasn't broken. She was becoming. The applause thundered behind her, but she didn't turn around. The curtain fell, but she had already risen. Backstage, the air was chaos, reporters outside, phones vibrating with press requests, social media ablaze. Hashtag Amara Blake unscripted hashtag that wasn't he acting hashtag queen of the stage and then, Julian called. Of course he did. A first ring. Then a second. Then a text. Can we talk? You went too far. It's not what it looks like. It was complicated. Amara stared at the screen. Then blocked the number. No rage. No drama. Just a swipe. The cleanest exit is the one that doesn't need an audience. She slipped out the back door into the night, no security, no entourage, no noise. Just a woman reclaiming her silence. Amara just disappeared. No press release. No farewell tour. No emotional Instagram caption with a soft focus sunset. Traded the noise of New York for the hush of waves and wind. A quiet seaside town, unnamed, unbothered, welcomed her like a secret. Its people didn't care for fame. They cared about fresh bread, honest conversation, and whether the storm would come early this season. It was exactly what she needed. She rented a small cottage with peeling blue shutters and a porch that creaked when you rocked too hard. The ocean was her audience now, wide, wild, and silent enough to hear her thoughts again. No scripts. No stage. Just stillness. And from that stillness, came words. She began to write, not to perform, not to impress, but to breathe. Poetry. Essays. Reflections on love, betrayal, faith, truth. On womanhood. On the cost of being silent. On the power of speaking anyway. She called the collection Curtain Call. What she thought would be a quiet memoir became a literary phenomenon. It wasn't just a book, it was a reckoning. Women from all walks of life, actresses, housewives, politicians, baristas, wrote her letters in trembling script and tear-stained ink. You put words to what I couldn't. Thank you for not shrinking. Because of you, I left him. Amara read every letter. Saved every one in a carved wooden box. Some days, she opened them just to remind herself of the ripple her truth had caused. And she didn't stop there. She began mentoring. Young actresses would take the train to see her, wide-eyed, brilliant, hungry for applause. She taught them to want more. Fame fades, she told them. But character echoes. They sat in her living room, barefoot and buzzing, notebooks open. She taught them how to say no when the role asked them to betray their soul. How to protect their name like royalty. How to act from the heart, not just the script. How talent without values. That's not art. That's noise, she'd say, eyes steady. And we were born to make music. She wasn't famous anymore. She was found. And in that quiet town, surrounded by crashing waves and the rustle of turning pages, Amara Blake became something more than a star. She became a legacy. 1 year later, the city called her name again, not with flashing lights or paparazzi storms, but with quiet reverence. Amara Blake returned to New York. Not to rehearse. Not to audition. But to speak. The Women in Arts Symposium was packed. Critics, students, artists, icons. The room hummed with expectation. They weren't here for a performance. They were here for Amara. She walked on stage in a sleek black pantsuit, tailored like armor. Her heels didn't echo, they commanded. Her hair, soft and intentional, framed her face like punctuation on a sentence she'd long been writing. The applause was instant, reverent, thunderous. But Amara didn't bask. She stood tall, took a breath, and spoke with the clarity of someone who had bled for every syllable. She didn't talk about fame. She talked about freedom. About art as responsibility. About knowing when to walk away. About refusing to let applause drown out your own heartbeat. She told the story, not of her heartbreak, but of her healing. Not of betrayal, but of becoming. And then, as if sealing the legacy in gold, she offered her final words. Sometimes, the roles we're given are not the ones we chose. But if you stand in your truth long enough, the world becomes your stage. And when it does, don't act. Just be. Silence. Then the entire room rose. It wasn't applause, it was agreement. It was the sound of women choosing themselves. The standing ovation roared like waves crashing over a city that finally understood what grace looks like when it wears scars like jewels. Amara Blake didn't bow. She smiled. Then walked off stage with the same strength she had found in the ashes. Not the end of a story. The beginning of a legacy. If you enjoyed this story, like, share and drop a comment. Subscribe to this channel for more interesting stories.